I thought the cruelest part of Christmas was my mother telling my 9-year-old son that only family gets to eat while holding the last dessert. But the next morning, what made her panic was not his tears, but a property document with my name on it. As I remained silent, their perfect image began to fracture. This is not about cake. This is how I turned their definition of family into the very thing that stripped them of their power. My name is Brielle Sutton. I am 36 years old, and I have spent the last decade convincing myself that tolerance is a form of love. I work as an operations manager for Ridgeway Compliance Group in downtown Denver. My job is entirely about identifying risks, spotting structural weaknesses, and preventing disasters before they happen. I am very good at it. I can look at a complex operational workflow and tell you exactly where it is going to break. Yet, for some reason, I could never apply that same analytical clarity to the people who share my DNA. I kept walking into the burning building of my childhood home, expecting not to choke on the smoke. My son, Evan, is 9 years old. He is the kind of child who apologizes when someone else bumps into him. He has a soft heart and a quiet way of moving through the world, as if he is afraid that taking up too much space might inconvenience someone. He loves drawing maps and reading about ocean currents. He is my entire world, and on this particular Christmas, I drove him 45 minutes south to the affluent suburb of Littleton, Colorado, so he could be reminded of exactly where he stood in the hierarchy of my mother's affection. The drive down was tense, though I tried to mask it with holiday music. We passed the large, snow-dusted houses of Littleton, where the driveways were heated and the wreaths were professional grade. My mother, Mary Ann, lives in one of those houses. It is a place where nothing is ever out of order. Her living room looks like a centerfold from a lifestyle magazine. The tree is always themed. This year it was champagne gold and frosted silver. There is never a pine needle on the floor. The air always smells aggressively of cinnamon and expensive potpourri, a scent that I have come to associate with a specific kind of judgment. When we arrived, the performance was already in full swing. My sister, Holly, was there. Holly is the golden child, a status she achieved simply by never leaving the orbit of my parents' expectations. She sat on the plush beige sofa, her 2 children running circles around the coffee table. My mother does not yell at Holly's children when they run. She laughs and calls it spirited. When Evan walked in and quietly took off his boots, placing them neatly on the mat, my mother merely nodded at him before turning back to Holly to compliment her on her choice of sweater. Dinner was the usual gauntlet of passive-aggressive commentary. My father, Dennis, sat at the head of the table, carving the ham with the seriousness of a surgeon. The conversation revolved entirely around Holly's husband's promotion and the new landscaping project my parents were planning for the spring. I ate in silence, cutting Evan's meat for him, catching his eye every few minutes to give him a reassuring smile. He smiled back, but I could see the tension in his small shoulders. He knows the rules. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't make a mess. Don't be Brielle's son. Then came the dessert. This was the main event. My mother prides herself on her Christmas desserts. This year, she had made a complex, multi-layered peppermint chocolate cheesecake. It sat on a crystal pedestal in the center of the table, looking heavy and rich. She stood up to serve it, wielding the silver cake server like a scepter. The room went quiet. Anticipating the sugar rush, I watched her cut the slices. First, a massive wedge for Dennis. Then, a perfect, generous slice for Holly. Next, slices for Holly's 2 children. She even paused to ask them if they wanted extra whipped cream. They shouted yes, and she laughed, dolloping huge white clouds onto their plates. Then, she cut a slice for herself. Finally, she cut a slice for me. She set the server down. There was still cake on the stand. At least 2 or 3 slices remained, but she wiped her hands on a linen napkin and sat down, picking up her fork. Evan sat there, his hands folded in his lap. He looked at the empty space in front of him. Then he looked at his cousin next to him, who was already shoveling chocolate into his mouth. Evan looked at me. confusion clouding his face. He did not say a word. He never asks for things. He assumes if he is forgotten, it is because he is not supposed to be remembered. I felt a coldness spread through my chest, sharper than the winter air outside. I cleared my throat. "Mom," I said, my voice steady. "You missed Evan." The room went dead silent. The only sound was the scraping of forks against china. Marianne looked up, a piece of cheesecake poised halfway to her mouth. She looked at me, and then she looked at Evan. Her expression was not one of embarrassment. It was not the face of a grandmother who had made a mistake. It was the face of a woman who was teaching a lesson. "Oh," she said. She shrugged, a tiny, dismissive motion. "I didn't miss him. I just didn't make enough for everyone to have seconds. So I had to prioritize." "Seconds?" I asked. "He hasn't had a first slice. There is still cake right there." I pointed to the stand. Marianne let out a short, incredulous laugh. She looked around the table, inviting everyone else to share in her amusement at my audacity. "Those are for later. Brielle, for the adults, if we want more with coffee. Look, you know how it is." She looked directly at my 9-year-old son. She locked eyes with him. "Only family gets to eat," she said. The sentence hung in the air. It was not screamed. It was spoken with the casual authority of a rule that everyone should already know. Only family gets to eat. My father kept chewing. Holly took a sip of her wine, looking down at her phone, pretending she hadn't heard. I looked at Evan. He was trying so hard to be brave. He forced a smile, but it was a broken, wobbly thing. His face flushed a deep, painful red. He looked down at his empty placemat and whispered, "It is okay. Mom, I am not hungry anyway." But I saw his eyes. They were swimming in tears that he was fighting with every ounce of his strength to hold back. He was 9 years old, and he had just been told by his grandmother that he did not qualify as family. Something inside me broke. It was not a loud break. It was not a glass shattering against a wall. It was the sound of a heavy steel door slamming shut and locking. It was the sound of a contract being terminated. For years, I had swallowed their insults. I had accepted the subtle digs about my single motherhood, the exclusion from family vacations, the way they forgot my birthday but demanded elaborate celebrations for theirs. I had taken it all because I wanted Evan to have grandparents. I wanted him to have a lineage. But looking at his red eyes, I realized I was not giving him a family. I was feeding him to wolves. I did not yell. I did not flip the table. I did not give them the reaction they wanted, the drama queen outburst that would allow them to paint me as the unstable one. I stood up. "Okay," I said. My voice was terrifyingly calm. It sounded like I was at work, terminating a vendor who had violated a safety protocol. I walked around the table to Evan's chair. "Stand up. Evan, we are going." "Brielle, sit down," my father grumbled, not looking up from his plate. "Don't make a scene." "There is no scene," I said. I picked up Evan's coat from the back of the chair. I helped him into it. He moved like a doll, stiff and shocked. "We are just leaving. Enjoy the cake." "You are being ridiculous," Marianne snapped, her fork clattering onto her plate. "It is just dessert. If he wants it that bad, he can have a bite of yours." I looked at her. I really looked at her. I memorized the way the chandelier light hit her perfectly coiffed hair. I memorized the cruelty etched into the lines around her mouth. "No," I said. "He is not begging for scraps." I took Evan's hand. His palm was sweaty. We walked out of the dining room, through the magazine-ready living room with the champagne-colored tree, and into the foyer. I put on my coat. I opened the front door. The cold air rushed in, biting and clean. "Brielle!" Holly called out from the dining room, her voice annoyed. "You are ruining Christmas." I stepped out onto the porch and pulled the heavy oak door shut behind me. The click of the latch was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It sounded like the end of an era. It sounded like the final period at the end of a long, miserable sentence. We walked to the car in silence. The snow crunched under our boots. I buckled Evan in, checked his seatbelt, and got into the driver's seat. I started the engine and backed out of the driveway. leaving the house and its perfect wreaths behind. We drove for 10 minutes in total silence. The highway was empty. The Christmas lights on the passing houses blurred into streaks of color. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. I was trying to breathe. I was trying to keep the rage from making me shake. Then, from the back seat, a small voice broke the silence. "Mom?" I looked in the rearview mirror. Evan was looking out the window, watching the dark trees pass by. "Yeah, Bud?" I choked out. "So," he hesitated, "am I family?" The question hit me like a physical blow to the chest. It sucked the oxygen right out of the car. I had to pull over. I guided the car onto the shoulder of the highway and put it in park. I turned around to face him. "Evan, look at me." He turned his head. A single tear finally escaped, tracking down his cheek. "You are my family," I said, my voice fierce. "You and me. We are the family, and that is all that matters." What she said, that was a lie. A mean lie from a mean person. Do you hear me? He nodded, but I could see the doubt. Words are cheap when you are 9 and your grandmother just starved you at a feast. I drove the rest of the way home with a singular focus. When we got back to our apartment, which is small, and sometimes cluttered, and definitely not featured in any magazines, I went straight to the kitchen. I did not have ingredients for a cheesecake. I did not have a silver server. I took out a box of graham crackers, a jar of hazelnut spread, and a can of whipped cream. "Come here," I told Evan. We stood at the counter. I spread the chocolate thick on the crackers. I sprayed mountains of whipped cream on top, messy and leaning. I put sprinkles on them. It looked ridiculous. It looked nothing like the elegant spread we had just left. "Eat as much as you want," I said. "All of it. It is just for us." Evan took a bite. He got chocolate on his nose. He giggled, a small, tentative sound. But later, after he had crashed from the sugar and fallen asleep in my bed, holding my arm like a lifeline, I could not sleep. I went into the living room and sat in the dark. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. Only family gets to eat. I replayed the sentence, and then my mind started to drift. It drifted back further than tonight. It went back to the paperwork I had seen over the years. The times my father had asked me to sign things without reading them because family helps family. The time they borrowed money from my college fund to fix the roof at the vacation cabin. A cabin I was barely allowed to visit. The way they always emphasized that everything they did was for the legacy. I sat there in the dark, and for the first time, I stopped seeing them as parents who were flawed. I started seeing them as operators. If family is the only group that gets to eat, I thought, then I need to figure out exactly what is on the menu. I did not know it then, sitting in my pajamas with chocolate smeared on the counter. But the war had already started. They thought they had just saved a slice of cake. They had no idea they had just cost themselves everything. The sun came up over Denver with a deceptive calmness. It was a sterile, bright winter morning, the kind that usually signals a fresh start. I sat at my kitchen island with a mug of black coffee, watching the steam rise, enjoying the silence of the apartment while Evan slept off his sugar crash in the other room. Then my phone began to vibrate against the countertop. It started as a low hum, a single notification, but within seconds it escalated into a continuous, angry buzz that rattled the spoon against my ceramic mug. I looked at the screen. "Mom, Mom, Mom." I watched the name flash and fade, over and over again. I did not pick up. I simply watched the device dance across the granite like a possessed object. By the time the screen finally went dark, the notification badge sat there, glowing red. 27 missed calls. 27 calls before 9 in the morning. For a moment, panic flared in my chest. Was someone hurt? Did Dennis have a heart attack from the cholesterol in that cheesecake? But then a voicemail notification popped up. I pressed play, holding the phone away from my ear, bracing myself for a tearful guilt trip about ruining Christmas or traumatizing the family with my dramatic exit. I expected sobbing. I expected the words, "ungrateful daughter." Instead, I heard hyperventilating. Brielle, pick up the phone right now. My mother's voice scratched through the speaker, devoid of any maternal warmth. It was sharp, frantic, and pitched an octave higher than usual. The bank just called. They are saying there is a flag on the account. You need to call them and authorize the release. Do not play games with me. Brielle, the file is frozen. You are going to ruin the refinancing if you do not fix this today. Call me back. The message ended with a harsh click. I stared at the phone. There was not a single mention of Evan, not a word about how he was doing, or an apology for the night before. There was no "I love you." There was only panic about a file, a bank, and refinancing. The file is frozen. I took a slow sip of my coffee. The liquid was bitter, grounding me. If this had been yesterday, I might have called back. I might have asked what she was talking about, apologized for the confusion, and tried to help. That is what the old Brielle did. The old Brielle fixed things. But the Brielle who sat here this morning had seen her son's face crumble over a slice of cake. I opened my messaging app. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I did not want to debate. I did not want to explain. I typed 2 sentences. You made it clear last night. If we are not family at the dinner table, we are not family on paper. I hit send. Then, with a calmness that surprised even me, I went into the settings menu, scrolled down to her contact, and pressed block caller. I felt a phantom weight lift off my shoulders. It was done. But silence in my family is never actually silence. It is just the deep breath before the explosion. 10 minutes later, Graham called. My brother Graham is 40 years old, 4 years my senior. He has spent his entire life playing the role of the United Nations peacekeeper in the war zone of our childhood. He is the one who smooths over Dennis's temper and reinterprets Marianne's insults as constructive criticism. He means well, mostly, but his neutrality has always felt like a form of complicity to me. I let it ring 3 times before answering. I am not going back there, Graham, I said, skipping the hello. And I am not unblocking her. Brielle, listen. Graham's voice sounded exhausted. I could hear the background noise of his house, his kids arguing over a video game, the hum of a dishwasher. I am not asking you to apologize. What she did last night it was messed up. I know that. I should have said more. But you didn't, I said. I know, he sighed. I know. But look, Dad is freaking out. Like, actually freaking out. It is not just Mom crying about the holiday. Dennis is pacing the living room talking about lawyers. I frowned, setting my mug down. Lawyers? Because I left dinner early? No, Graham lowered his voice, as if he was afraid someone might be listening on his end. He is talking about asset protection. He keeps asking if anyone has spoken to you. If you have signed the waiver for the Coeur d'Alene property, he is ranting about you holding the estate hostage. Brielle, what is he talking about? You do not have anything to do with their money. You have been financially independent since you were 22. I paused. The morning sun suddenly felt a little less bright, the shadows in the kitchen a little longer. I have no idea, I said honestly. I rent my apartment. I lease my car. I haven't taken a dime from them in over a decade. Well, he is scared, Graham said. And you know Dad. He does not get scared. He gets litigious. He said something about the LLC structure being vulnerable if you are hostile. Just heads up. He might try to serve you with something just to scare you back into line. Let him try, I said. Thanks for the warning. Graham. I hung up, but the unease lingered. It sat in my stomach, heavy and cold. Coeur d'Alene. The name of the town in Idaho scratched at a memory I had buried under years of busy work weeks and parenting. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to travel back in time. It was 5 or 6 years ago. Evan was a toddler. I was exhausted, working 2 jobs, trying to prove I could make it on my own. My parents had called a family meeting, a rare occurrence. They had been crying. They said the vacation home in Idaho, a sprawling cabin near the lake that they called the Legacy, was in trouble. They needed a bridge loan for renovations to keep the insurance valid, or they would lose it. They had asked us to chip in. Holly had cried and said she had no liquidity. Graham had put in some, and I had just received a performance bonus at work. It was my safety net. It was $10,000. I remembered sitting at their dining table, the same table where Evan was starved last night. Dennis had slid a stack of papers toward me. "It is just a formality, Brielle," he had said. "We are putting everyone on the title who contributes, so your investment is protected. It is a family pot. We help each other." I had signed because I wanted them to be proud of me. I wanted to be the daughter who saved the house, not the single mom who was a burden. I opened my laptop. My heart was hammering a rhythm against my ribs now. I logged into my personal email and searched for Idaho and Mom. Nothing. I searched for signing and Dennis. Nothing. And then, a new email pinged into my inbox. It was not from my family. It was from an address I did not recognize. Legal@Harrison&Associates.com. The subject line read, "Urgent. Compliance matter regarding Cedar Hollow Holdings." I clicked it open. "Dear Miss Sutton, we represent your father, Mr. Dennis Sutton, regarding the management of Cedar Hollow Holdings, LLC. It has come to our attention that there may be a misunderstanding regarding your custodial duties as a minority member. We are preparing a document for your immediate signature to clarify your non-voting status and to facilitate the necessary refinancing of the underlying assets. Please review the attached PDF and return it by close of business today to avoid any disruption to the family trust structure. Regards, Preston J. Harrison, Esca." I read the email twice. The tone was masterful. It was polite on the surface, but underneath, it was patronizing. It treated me like a rebellious teenager who needed to be shepherded back into the fold. It assumed I would just sign. It assumed I was stupid. But they had forgotten what I do for a living. I work in compliance. I spend 40 hours a week reading the fine print that corporations try to hide. I look for the trapdoors in contracts. I find the liabilities people try to sweep under the rug. I downloaded the attachment, but I did not open it. Instead, I sat back in my chair. Why the rush? Why 27 calls? Why the immediate threat of a lawyer less than 12 hours after I walked out of a party? People do not panic like this over a bruised ego. They panic like this when they are exposed. If they needed my signature to clarify my non-voting status, that meant currently, right this second, my status was not non-voting. If they needed me to sign to facilitate refinancing, that meant they could not get the money without me. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. It was not a smile of happiness. It was the smile of a hunter who just realized the predator is actually the prey. They had spent my whole life making me feel small. They used money as a weapon, withholding it to control Holly and Graham, and flashing it to make me feel inadequate. They had built their entire kingdom on the idea that they held the keys and we were just guests. But they had made a mistake, in their arrogance, in their haste to grab my $10,000 years ago. They had cemented me into the foundation of their precious castle. I picked up my phone. I did not call Graham back. I did not call my mother. I went to my contacts and scrolled down to a number I had saved from a networking event 2 years ago. A woman named Tessa Lang. She was a shark of an attorney who specialized in forensic accounting and complex family estates. I remembered her telling me once over drinks that she hated bullies. I pressed call. "This is Brielle Sutton," I said when the receptionist answered. "I need to speak to Tessa. Tell her it is about a hostile attempt to force a signature on an LLC, and tell her I think my family is hiding something in the books." I looked at the sleeping form of my son in the next room. Only family gets to eat. "Okay," I whispered to the empty kitchen. "Let's see who is actually hungry." I went into my closet and pulled down a heavy plastic storage bin from the top shelf. It was dusty, filled with things I had meant to throw away but never could. Inside, buried under old college textbooks and a sweater I had not worn in a decade, were my journals. I am a person who documents things. It is a habit born of survival. When you grow up in a house where reality is constantly rewritten to suit the mood of the patriarch, you learn to keep your own records. You write things down so that when they tell you that never happened, you can open a page and know that you are not crazy. I sat on the floor of my bedroom, Evan still asleep down the hall, and I began to read. It was like conducting an audit of my own trauma. Entry from May 17th, 2004. Holly turned 16. My parents bought her a brand new convertible with a red bow on the hood. I was 20, driving a beat-up sedan that stalled at every red light. When I asked for help with repairs, Dennis told me that struggle builds character. Entry from August 3rd, 2009. I was moving into my first real apartment. Dennis offered to co-sign the lease. I wrote down his exact words. It looks better to have a man's name on the document. Brielle. Landlords trust stability. I had refused. I remembered how angry he was. Not disappointed, but angry. At the time, I thought he was just old-fashioned. Now, looking at the ink on the page, I saw it for what it was. He was not trying to help me secure housing. He was trying to secure a key to my front door. I flipped forward. November 2015, the purchase of my first condo. This was a vivid memory. Dennis had sat me down in his study. The air smelled of leather and expensive scotch. He had slid a document across the desk. I have spoken to the broker. He had said, if you put me on the title as a co-owner, I can get you a rate that is 0.5 percentage point lower. It saves you money. It is just for convenience. Convenience. That was their favorite word. I had almost done it. I was a single mom, terrified of the mortgage payments. Saving money sounded like a lifeline, but something in my gut, some primal instinct that predated my career in risk management, had screamed no. I told him I wanted to do it on my own. He had called me stubborn. He had called me ungrateful. He did not speak to me for 3 months. I closed the journal. The pattern was undeniable. Every time they offered help, there was a hook embedded in the bait. They did not give gifts. They purchased leverage. The money for the Idaho cabin renovation was not a family contribution. It was me buying a share of stock in a corporation I did not know I was working for. My phone buzzed. It was Graham. Coffee shop on 3rd and Main, 30 minutes. Do not bring Evan. I left Evan with a neighbor, a kind woman named Mrs. Higgins who actually enjoyed his company, and drove to the coffee shop. It was a neutral ground. No champagne-colored Christmas trees, no polished silverware, just the noise of an espresso machine and the smell of roasted beans. Graham was sitting in a booth in the back. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was wearing a hoodie, which was uncharacteristic for him. Graham usually wore button-downs even on weekends, always ready to be the presenter of the family image. I sat down across from him. I did not order anything. You look like hell, I said. And you look scary, he replied, attempting a weak smile. Mom is still crying. By the way, she has moved on from the Brielle is cruel phase to the Brielle is having a mental breakdown phase. She is telling people you are overworked and snapped. Let her talk, I said. I do not care about the gossip. Graham, tell me about the money. Graham looked around the shop, checking to see if anyone was listening. He leaned in close. They are trying to restructure the estate, he whispered. Dad has been meeting with wealth management consultants for months. They want to move the Idaho property and some other assets into a new trust. Something about tax shielding and long-term planning, but they hit a wall. Let me guess, I said. Cedar Hollow Holdings. Graham blinked. How did you know the name? I got an email from a lawyer named Harrison this morning, I said. He tried to bully me into signing a waiver. Graham ran a hand over his face. Yeah, that sounds like Dad. Here's the thing. Brielle, that LLC? It is not just the cabin. Over the last few years, Dad has moved other things into it. A couple of rental properties in Aurora, some investment accounts. He treated it like a junk drawer for assets he wanted to keep safe. My blood ran cold. And I am a member? You, me, and Holly, Graham said, but mostly you and me. Because of that cash infusion we did years ago, Holly never put money in, so her stake is structured differently. But you own a percentage. And because of how the operating agreement was written, back when Dad was trying to be clever and save on legal fees by using a template. He needs unanimous consent to transfer the assets out. I sat back against the vinyl booth. It all made sense. The desperation, the 27 calls. The dessert was just the spark that lit the fuse, but the explosive was buried in the paperwork. If I refused to sign, I froze their assets. I held the keys to their restructuring. "He is going to come for you," Graham said, his voice shaking slightly. "He is talking about proving you are incompetent, or saying that your contribution was a loan, not equity. He will play dirty." "I know," I said. "That is why I am not playing defense anymore." I stood up. "Graham," I asked, looking down at him, "why are you telling me this? You always take their side." Graham looked down at his untouched coffee. "I saw Evan's face last night. Brielle, I have a son too. If Mom ever looked at my kid like that, I do not know. Maybe I'm just tired of the show." I touched his shoulder, briefly. "Thank you." I left the coffee shop and drove straight to the address I had looked up earlier. The offices of Tessa Lang were located in a glass tower downtown. It was a place that smelled of money and aggression. Tessa was a woman in her late 40s with a haircut that looked like it could cut glass and a suit that cost more than my car. She did not offer me tea or sympathy. She sat behind a desk that was completely clear of paper, save for a single yellow legal pad. I told her everything. I told her about the Christmas party. I told her about the phone calls. I showed her the email from Harrison. I told her what Graham had said about the rental properties and the investment accounts being moved into the LLC. Tessa listened without interrupting. She took notes in a shorthand that looked like code. When I finished, she tapped her pen against the desk. "This is not a family dispute," Tessa said, her voice dry and precise. "This is a corporate deadlock. Your father has commingled assets. He has put personal property and income-generating assets into a container that he does not fully control, and he did it to hide them or protect them, likely assuming his children would always be obedient rubber stamps." "He assumes a lot of things," I said. "The email from Harrison is a bluff," she continued. "They want you to sign a document clarifying your non-voting status that confirms you currently have voting status. If you were truly a silent partner with no rights, they wouldn't need your signature to refinance. They are asking you to retroactively strip yourself of power." She looked at me, her eyes narrowing. She seemed to be assessing me, looking for weakness. "Brielle, I need to ask you a question, and I need you to think very carefully before you answer." "Okay," I said. "Your father seems comfortable moving assets around. He seems comfortable with complex structures." She leaned forward. "Are you sure, absolutely sure, that your signature has not appeared on documents you did not physically sign?" I froze. The question hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I mean," Tessa said, "that in family businesses like this, where the patriarch demands total control, it is not uncommon for corners to be cut. Have you ever given him a power of attorney? Have you ever given him a digital copy of your signature?" The memory hit me so hard I almost gasped. It was 3 years ago, April, tax season. I was at my parents' house to pick up Evan. Dennis was in his office, surrounded by receipts. He was stressed, yelling at his computer screen. "Brielle, come here," he had shouted. I had walked in. "The accountant needs a signature on these trust documents for the grandkids' education fund," he had said. "But the scanner is acting up and I need to email this file in 10 minutes or we miss the deadline." He had held out a piece of white paper and a black felt-tip pen. "Just sign your name here, in the middle of the blank page," he had instructed. "I will scan it as a high-resolution image and overlay it onto the PDF. It is just for the internal file. It saves us having to print and rescan the whole packet." I had hesitated. It felt weird. "Don't be difficult," he had snapped. "It is for Evan's college fund. Do you want him to have money for school or not?" I had signed a clean, clear signature on a blank white page. I looked at Tessa. My hands were trembling. "Yes," I whispered. 3 years ago, he told me it was for a tax filing. He scanned it. Tessa's face did not change, but the energy in the room shifted. It went from a consultation to a war room. "If he has a high-resolution file of your signature," Tessa said, her voice dropping lower, "and he has been moving assets into an LLC without your consent, then we are not just looking at a civil dispute over a vacation home." She opened a drawer and pulled out a fresh file folder. "We are looking at fraud," she said, "and if he used that signature to sign bank documents or loan applications without your specific authorization for each instance, he has committed a felony." I stared at the city skyline outside the window. I thought about my mother holding the cake. Only family gets to eat. They had used family as a shield to hide their crimes. They thought because we shared blood, I would never look under the hood. They thought I would never call the police on my own father. "What do we do?" I asked. Tessa picked up her pen. "We do not sign their waiver," she said. "We demand a full forensic accounting of the last 5 years of Cedar Hollow Holdings. We ask for every document that bears your name, and we tell them that if they do not provide it within 48 hours, we will file a subpoena." She looked at me. "Are you ready for this? Because once we send this letter, there is no going back to Sunday dinners." I thought of Evan asking me if he was family. I thought of the way he tried to make himself small so he wouldn't be a bother. "Send it," I said. "I am not hungry for their dinner anymore." Tessa Lang did not waste time with pleasantries. She treated the Secretary of State's business portal like a crime scene she was processing for DNA. I watched her from the other side of the desk. The silence in the room punctuated only by the aggressive clacking of her mechanical keyboard. "Got it," she said, her voice sharp. She spun the monitor around so I could see. "Cedar Hollow Holdings, LLC," she read aloud. "Registered in Idaho, foreign qualification in Colorado, managers listed, Dennis Sutton, members listed, Dennis Sutton, Marianne Sutton, Graham Sutton, and Brielle Sutton." She pointed a manicured finger at a specific line in the filing history. "Here is the amendment from 5 years ago. Capital contribution. When you gave them that $10,000, they did not book it as a loan. They booked it as an equity buy-in." I squinted at the screen. "Why does that matter? It means I own a piece of the cabin, right?" "It matters because of how the operating agreement is structured," Tessa explained, her eyes scanning the document with predatory speed. "Your father used a standard template. It requires a supermajority for day-to-day operations, but it requires unanimous consent for any major event. That includes selling assets, taking on debt against the property, or changing the membership structure." She looked up at me, a tight smile playing on her lips. "He cannot refinance the cabin without your signature. He cannot sell it. He cannot even use it as collateral for another loan unless every single member signs off. By taking your money to fix the roof back then, he inadvertently handed you a kill switch for the entire company." The realization settled over me. This was why the voicemail had been so frantic. This was why he was trying to bully me into signing a waiver retroactively. He was likely sitting in a bank office somewhere, pen in hand, realizing that the daughter he treated like a servant was actually the gatekeeper to his liquidity. "He is stuck," I said. "He is paralyzed," Tessa corrected. "And right now, he is trying to perform surgery on this LLC without anesthesia. He needs that refinancing. If he does not get it, whatever dominoes he has lined up are going to fall." Tessa spun the screen back to herself. "I am drafting the letter now. We are not just saying no. We are invoking your rights as a member." She typed furiously for 10 minutes, the printer whirred to life. She handed me the sheet. It was beautiful in its brutality. "To the managing member of Cedar Hollow Holdings, LLC. Please be advised that Brielle Sutton has retained counsel regarding her interest in the company, effectively immediately. Ms. Sutton does not consent to any modification of the operating agreement, nor does she consent to any encumbrance of company assets. Furthermore, pursuant to Idaho statute and the operating agreement, Ms. Sutton demands a full inspection of the company books, including but not limited to bank statements, tax returns, and general ledgers for the past 5 years. 5 years? I asked. If we are going to look, Tessa said, We look at everything. She faxed it, then she emailed it, then she sent a copy via courier. Now, Tessa said, leaning back in her chair and checking her watch. We wait, usually. Corporate counsel takes about 2 days to respond. It took 45 minutes. My phone rang. It was not a cell number. It was the landline from my parents' house, the house with the heated driveway and the perfect wreaths. I looked at Tessa. She nodded. Put it on speaker. Do not say anything other than hello. I pressed the button. Hello? Brielle. My mother's voice exploded into the quiet office. She was weeping. It was a theatrical, heaving sob that I had heard 1,000 times before. It was the sound she made when a waiter got her order wrong, or when it rained on a day she wanted to host a garden party. Oh, Brielle, how could you? How could you send a letter like that to your own father? I stared at the phone. Hello, Mom. He is sitting here holding his chest, Marianne wailed. We are trying to secure the future for this family. We are trying to set up everything so we can retire in peace and leave something for you kids. And you send a lawyer to threaten us? Do you have any idea what you have done? You have frozen everything. The bank manager called us. They are pulling the term sheet. I waited. I waited for her to say I am sorry about Evan. I waited for her to say I shouldn't have said he wasn't family. We have a reputation in this town, she continued, her voice hardening. People look up to us, and now you are making us look like criminals? Asking for tax returns? Asking for ledgers? We are your parents. Brielle, this is about honor. This is about the Sutton legacy. Is that all? I asked. Is that all? She shrieked. You are destroying us. Then there was a scuffling sound. The phone was snatched away. Listen to me, my father's voice growled. It was low, shaking with a rage that vibrated the speaker. I do not know what kind of game you are playing, or who put these ideas in your head, but you are treading on dangerous ground. That LLC is my business. I built it. You put in pocket change 5 years ago. You have no right to audit me. I have every right, I said, surprised by how steady my voice was. I read the agreement. You are an ungrateful child, Dennis spat. I gave you life. I put a roof over your head. And this is how you repay me? By blocking a transaction that is crucial for our survival? If you do not withdraw that letter within the hour, Brielle, I am done. You will be cut out. I will make sure you never see a dime of inheritance. You are destroying the legacy. The legacy, I repeated. Is that what we are calling it? I am warning you, he said. Stop this now. Goodbye, Dad. I hung up. The silence in Tessa's office felt different now. It was electric. Tessa was not looking at the phone. She was looking at the ceiling, thinking. That was interesting, she said. He is furious, I said, my hands shaking slightly. I have never heard him that scared. Exactly, Tessa said. She turned to me. Brielle, listen to me. I deal with family disputes all the time. Usually when a child asks for financial records. The parents get annoyed. They get defensive. They say it is a hassle. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. They do not scream that you are destroying their survival. They do not talk about crucial transactions being blocked unless they are on the edge of a cliff. She tapped the file on her desk. If the LLC was just a vacation home and some savings, he would have just sent the records and told you to go to hell. But he is panicking. He reacted like someone who just had the police knock on his door. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. He is not afraid of you stopping the refinance because he needs the cash for a renovation. He is afraid of you seeing the books. There is something in those ledgers that he does not want anyone to see, especially not a court, and definitely not the IRS. I thought about the tax signature I had given him on the blank page. I thought about Graham saying there were rental properties I didn't know about. He is hiding something, I whispered. He is hiding everything, Tessa said, and by demanding the last 5 years of records, you just threatened to turn on the lights in a room full of cockroaches. She picked up her pen. So, here is the question. Brielle, do we back down and let him have his legacy, or do we press harder? I looked at the phone. I remembered Evan's face in the car. Am I family? They were willing to erase my son to protect their image. They were willing to use my name to secure their wealth, but deny my child a slice of cake. He told me I was destroying the legacy, I said. I looked at Tessa. If his legacy is built on lies, then maybe it deserves to be destroyed. We press, I said. We do not just defend, we attack. I want to know where every single dollar went. Tessa smiled. It was the first time she looked genuinely happy. I was hoping you would say that, she said. I will call the forensic accountant. We are going to tear Cedar Hollow Holdings apart, brick by brick. 2 days after I declared war on my father's limited liability company, my mother declared a ceasefire. But because she is Marianne Sutton, she did not do it with a phone call or a private visit. She did it with a Facebook event invite. I was sitting at my desk at Ridgeway Compliance, cross-referencing a safety audit, when my phone lit up. It was a notification from the social media platform I barely used. Marianne Sutton invited you to an event, the Sutton Family Holiday Reconciliation Dinner. I stared at the screen, blinking. The audacity was breathtaking. She had chosen a cover photo for the event. It was a picture from 4 years ago, taken at a professional studio. In the photo, my parents were seated on velvet chairs, looking regal. Holly was standing behind them, her hand resting affectionately on Dennis's shoulder, looking radiant in a red dress. Graham was smiling his politician's smile, and there I was, off to the side, looking slightly washed out because I had been recovering from the flu that week, holding a squirming Evan who was blurring the edge of the frame. The description read, Christmas is a time for forgiveness and gathering. The Suttons are hosting a special dinner to celebrate the bonds that cannot be broken. Please join us for an evening of gratitude and grace. I clicked on the guest list. It was not a family dinner, it was a gala. There were 42 people invited. I scrolled through the names: Reverend Miller from their church, the president of the local Rotary Club, 2 members of the chaotic Homeowners Association board my mother chaired, a handful of Dennis's golf buddies, including a man who I knew sat on the zoning commission, and significantly, Mr. Henderson, the senior loan officer at the bank my father used. I was not tagged in the post. Graham and Holly were tagged prominently. The narrative was being constructed in real time. I was being cast as the prodigal daughter, the erratic element who had caused a scene, and they were the benevolent monarchs offering me a path to redemption. If I didn't show up, I looked like the villain who rejected their olive branch. If I did show up, I was walking onto a stage where the script had already been written, and my lines were simply to nod and smile while they publicly forgave me for a crime I didn't commit. My office phone rang. It was Graham. Did you see it? He asked. I am looking at it right now, I said. It is a trap. It is a press conference, Graham corrected. Dad is trying to show the community, and specifically his lenders, that the family unit is stable. He needs to project unity so the rumors about the estate freezing don't spook his creditors. If we look happy, the money keeps flowing. I am not going, I said. I am not going to be a prop. You have to go, Graham said, but his voice was different this time. It wasn't the pleading tone of the peacekeeper. It was the strategic tone of an ally. If you do not go, they control the story. They will tell everyone you are mentally unstable, that you are having a breakdown, and that is why you are attacking the estate. They will discredit you before you even get the financial records. He paused. I will pick you up, leaving Evan at home. We go in, we stand together, and we do not let them isolate you. I am done playing their game. Brielle, I am going to be your shield. I hesitated. I looked at the photo of my parents on the screen, the perfect facade covering up a foundation of rot. Pick me up at 6, I said. I wore a dress that I usually saved for board meetings. It was navy blue, tailored, and sharp. It was armor. I did not wear the soft, knitted sweaters my mother preferred. I pulled my hair back tight. When I walked out to Graham's car, the winter air was biting. Graham was leaning against the hood of his SUV. He looked nervous, but determined. Where is Evan? he asked. Mrs. Higgins is watching him, I said. I told him I had a boring work meeting. I am not letting him near that house until I know he is safe from their words. Good, Graham said. He opened the passenger door for me. Let's go crash a party. The drive to Littleton felt different this time. There was no dread in my stomach, only a cold, focused anger. We pulled into the driveway. The house was lit up like a beacon. There were cars lining the street, Mercedes, Lexuses, pristine trucks. It looked like a brochure for the American dream. As we walked up the path, I could hear the murmur of conversation and the clinking of glass. Graham stopped at the front door. He turned to me and took a deep breath. Whatever happens in there, he said, I am on your side. I should have been on your side 20 years ago. I am sorry it took me this long. I squeezed his hand. Let's just get through dinner. He opened the door. The heat hit us first, then the smell. Cinnamon and expensive perfume. The foyer was packed. My mother was holding court near the staircase, wearing a silver dress that shimmered under the chandelier. When she saw us, her eyes widened. For a split second, I saw fear. She hadn't expected me to actually come. But the mask slipped back into place instantly. Brielle, she exclaimed, her voice pitched loud enough to carry over the conversation. She rushed forward, arms open. Oh, thank goodness. We were so worried you wouldn't make it after everything. She hugged me. Her body was stiff. She smelled of hairspray and desperation. Hello, Mother, I said, not hugging back. She pulled away, keeping her hands on my shoulders, framing me for the audience. Everyone, look who is here. My daughter, Brielle. The family is whole again. A ripple of polite applause went through the room. I saw faces I recognized. Neighbors who had known me since I was a child. They looked at me with a mixture of pity and curiosity. They had heard the stories. They were waiting to see if I would snap. Dennis appeared from the crowd. He was holding a scotch glass. His face was flushed, his eyes hard. He walked up to me and clapped a hand on my shoulder. It was a heavy, possessive grip. Glad you came to your senses, he muttered, low enough that only I could hear. Then, louder. Get your sister a drink. Graham, let's celebrate. We moved into the dining room. It was set up buffet style to accommodate the crowd, but there was a main table for the family and the VIP guests. Graham and I were steered toward it. Holly was already seated. She looked up as I approached. She offered a tight, victorious smile. In her mind, my presence was an admission of defeat. She thought I had come back to apologize. She thought the threat of being cut off had worked. Hi, Brielle, she said, smoothing her napkin. I see you didn't bring Evan. Probably for the best. It is a grown-up night. He is busy, I said, taking the seat opposite her. Doing what? She smirked. Maps? Being happy? I said. You should try it sometime. Holly's smile faltered, but before she could respond, Dennis tapped a spoon against his glass. The room went silent. The 30 or so guests turned toward the head of the table. Dennis stood up. He looked every inch the patriarch. Strong, successful, benevolent. Friends, neighbors, he began, his voice booming with practiced charisma. Thank you for coming tonight on such short notice. You know, the holidays can be stressful. We all know that. A few people chuckled politely. Tempers flare, Dennis continued, his eyes scanning the room but carefully avoiding mine. Words are said, feelings get hurt, but that is the beauty of this season. It reminds us of what truly matters. He raised his glass. Legacy, he said. Blood, the people who will stand by you when the world turns its back. We have had a challenging week. My daughter Brielle. He gestured to me. Every eye in the room swiveled to my face. I sat perfectly still, my spine against the chair. She has been going through a lot lately. Dennis lied smoothly. The pressure of being a single mother, the stress of her job, it takes a toll. And sometimes, we lash out at the ones we love the most. But tonight is about forgiveness. It is about saying that no matter what misunderstandings arise, no matter what paperwork gets filed in the heat of the moment, He paused for effect, letting the reference to the legal threat hang in the air as if it were a tantrum I had thrown. We are family, and family forgives. Only family understands the burden of carrying a name like ours. So, to my children, Holly, Graham, and Brielle, I say this: I love you, and I forgive you. He drank. The room erupted in applause. People were dabbing their eyes. Mrs. Alden, the neighbor who lived 3 houses down, beamed at me, mouthing, "He is such a good man." It was masterful. He had just publicly absolved himself of starving my son, and simultaneously framed my legal inquiry as a mental health episode that he was magnanimously overlooking. Holly clinked her glass against her husband's, looking at me with pure triumph. Her expression said, "Checkmate. You are the crazy one. We are the saints." I felt a fire rising in my throat. It was not the hot, chaotic anger of the other night. It was a cold, blue flame. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to scream that he was a fraud, that he stole my signature, that he was using us as props in a financial shell game. But I felt a hand on my arm. It was Graham. He was gripping my forearm tight. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at our father. The applause died down. The conversation started to pick up again. Dennis sat down, looking satisfied, reaching for a roll. Graham leaned in close to me. His voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the noise of the room like a razor. "Do you see what they just did?" Graham whispered. "They just buried the truth under a toast." "I know," I whispered back. "I need to leave." "No," Graham said. "If you leave, you prove them right. If you flip the table, you prove them right." He took a drink of his water, his hand trembling slightly. "Dennis thinks he just won," Graham said. "He thinks by saying, 'I forgive you,' he negated your lawyer's letter. He thinks he shamed you into silence." Graham turned to look at me. For the first time in 40 years, the fear was gone from his eyes. "If we don't speak tonight," Graham said, "they rewrite history for another 10 years. They will tell Evan that his mother was crazy and his grandfather was a saint. Is that what you want?" "No," I said. "Good," Graham said. He let go of my arm. He pushed his chair back. The scraping sound was loud against the hardwood floor. Graham stood up. He didn't tap his glass. He didn't ask for permission. He just stood there, towering over the table, until the conversation around us faltered and died out again. Dennis looked up, annoyed. "Graham, sit down. We are eating." Graham did not sit down. He looked at the room full of neighbors and business partners. He looked at the audience his parents had assembled to witness their victory. "Actually," Graham said, his voice projecting clearly to the back of the room, "I would like to add to the toast." Dennis's eyes narrowed. "Graham, this isn't the time." "It is exactly the time," Graham said. He looked down at Marianne, who was frozen with her fork halfway to her mouth. "You talked about family. Dad, you talked about how family is the only thing that matters, about how we forgive." Graham looked at me, and then he looked back at Dennis. "But you left out the part about the dessert," Graham said. The room went deadly quiet. "Excuse me?" Dennis said, his voice dropping to a warning growl. "The dessert," Graham repeated. "At Christmas. The reason Brielle left. You didn't mention that part. You didn't mention that Mom looked at a 9-year-old boy and told him that only family gets to eat." A gasp rippled through the room. Mrs. Alden put her hand to her mouth. "Graham, you are drunk," Holly hissed. "Sit down." "I am stone-cold sober," Graham said. "And I think if we are going to talk about forgiveness, we should be clear about what we are forgiving. Are we forgiving Brielle for being upset? Or should we be asking why a grandmother would starve her grandson to make a point about hierarchy?" Dennis stood up, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "That is enough. You are embarrassing yourself." "I am not the one who should be embarrassed," Graham said. He turned to the guests. "My sister isn't crazy. She isn't overworked. She is a mother protecting her child from people who use family as a weapon." He looked at me. "And she isn't the only one who remembers what happened." The mask had not just cracked, it had shattered, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one holding the hammer. The silence that followed Graham's declaration was not the peaceful quiet of a snowy night. It was the vacuum of a room where all the oxygen had suddenly been sucked out. The 42 guests at the Sutton family holiday reconciliation dinner sat frozen, forks hovering halfway to their mouths, wine glasses stalled in midair. Graham remained standing. He looked like a man who had just jumped off a cliff and realized, to his surprise, that he could fly. My mother, Marianne, was the first to move. Her social survival instincts, honed over 4 decades of hosting garden parties and charity galas, kicked into overdrive. She let out a laugh. It was a high, brittle sound, like glass breaking. "Oh, Graham!" she exclaimed, waving her hand dismissively as if swatting away a fly. "You have had too much wine. Listen to him. Everyone. So dramatic. It was a joke. A family inside joke. We have a very dry sense of humor in this house." She turned her gaze to me. Her eyes were wide, pleading, and terrified, behind the layers of mascara. I saw the frantic calculation. She needed me to play along. She needed me to be the dutiful daughter one last time. If I laughed, if I nodded, the tension would break, and she could spin this as a quirky family misunderstanding. "Tell them, Brielle," she said, her voice tight with command masked as affection. "Tell everyone how much we teased Evan. It was just a game, right?" The room turned to me, the zoning commissioner, the bank loan officer, the neighbors. They were all watching. They wanted me to save the moment. They wanted to go back to eating their roast beef without the indigestion of moral conflict. I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had spent my entire life telling me I was too loud, too difficult, too much. I looked at the woman who had watched my son's heart break over a piece of cheesecake and felt nothing but annoyance. I did not scream. I did not throw my drink. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but in the dead silence of the room, it carried like a gunshot. "It was not a joke," I continued, my voice steady and cold. "There was no punchline. You held the last slice of cake. You looked at my 9-year-old son, and you told him that only family gets to eat. You watched him cry, and you told me I was making a scene when I took him home." Marianne's smile faltered, twitching at the corners. "Brielle, do not be ridiculous. You are misremembering." "I am not misremembering," I cut in. "And neither is Graham. You told a child he did not belong. You made him feel like a stranger in the house where his mother grew up. There is no humor in that. Mother, there is only cruelty." A gasp rippled through the room. A fork clattered onto a plate. Dennis slammed his hand down on the table. The silverware jumped. His face was a deep, mottled red, the vein in his temple pulsing. The facade of the benevolent patriarch had vanished, replaced by the bully I knew so well. "That is enough," he roared. "I will not have you sit at my table and slander your mother. You want to talk about cruelty? Let's talk about gratitude. We built that vacation home in Idaho for you kids. We put your names on the deed. We have spent our lives building a legacy so you could have something, and this is how you thank us? By creating a spectacle?" He turned to the guests, spreading his arms wide, trying to regain control of the narrative. "We included her in the estate," Dennis shouted, pointing an accusing finger at me. "We gave her equity in a $1 million property. We did everything to secure her financial future, and she throws it in our face because of a misunderstanding about dessert?" It was a good pivot. He was trying to make it about money. He knew that in this room, among these people, money was the ultimate virtue. If he gave me money, he couldn't be a villain. I stood up. "It was not a gift," I said, my voice rising just enough to be heard over his blustering. "You did not put my name on that deed to help me. You did it because you needed my capital to fix the roof, and you needed my name to pad the member list for your tax strategy." "You are lying," Dennis spat. "It was never about helping us," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "It was about control. You use money to keep us on a leash. You use legacy as a threat, but the moment Evan became inconvenient, the moment he didn't fit your picture, you cut him out. You do not care about family, Dad. You care about compliance. You want subordinates, not children. The room was vibrating with tension. This was not just a dinner party argument. This was a public execution of their character. You are sensitive and ungrateful, Holly chimed in, her voice shrill. She looked around the table, seeking allies. She has always been like this, always the victim. Mom and Dad have done everything for us. Is that so? The voice came from the other side of the room. It was not Graham. It was Mrs. Alden. Mrs. Alden was 72 years old. She had lived in the neighborhood since before I was born. She was the treasurer of the church and the unofficial historian of the street. She was a woman whose approval my mother coveted above almost anyone else's. She stood up slowly, clutching her napkin. I stopped by on Christmas Eve, Mrs. Alden said. Her voice was shaky but clear. I came to the back door to drop off the tins of peppermint bark I made. The kitchen door was open. My mother went pale. Barbara, please. I heard it, Mrs. Alden said, looking directly at Marianne. I thought I had misheard. I didn't want to believe it, but I heard you say it. Marianne, only family gets to eat. And I saw little Evan walking out to the car a minute later. He looked devastated. She paused, looking around the room at the other guests. I went home and told my husband. Mrs. Alden continued. I told him. Surely I am wrong. Marianne Sutton is a good Christian woman, but watching you tonight, watching how you try to spin this. She shook her head, a look of profound disappointment settling on her face. That is not a joke, Marianne. That is a sin. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a reputation shattering. The guests were no longer looking at my parents with admiration. The bank manager was frowning, looking down at his plate. The zoning commissioner was shifting uncomfortably in his chair. The neighbors were exchanging glances, not of confusion, but of judgment. The illusion of the perfect Sutton family, the image my parents had spent 40 years curating, had just been dismantled by the one person they couldn't discredit. Holly looked frantic. She stood up, knocking her chair back. This is ridiculous, Holly shouted. Brielle put you up to this. She is manipulating everyone. She is just overly sensitive. She takes everything the wrong way. She looked around the room. A forced, desperate smile plastered on her face. Come on, everyone, it's Brielle. You know how she is. But nobody laughed. Nobody nodded. The guests looked down at their food. They looked at the walls. They looked anywhere but at Holly. The social contract had been broken. The cruelty had been exposed, and no amount of "that's just Brielle" could cover it up. I looked at Graham. He was still standing, his chest heaving slightly. He looked at me and nodded. It was a nod of solidarity. He had done it. He had blown up the bridge. I picked up my purse. I did not need to say anything else. There was no need for a closing argument. The verdict was written on the faces of everyone in the room. I turned and walked toward the door. My heels clicked against the hardwood floor, a steady, rhythmic sound in the silent house. If you walk out that door, Dennis shouted after me, his voice cracking with desperation. Don't you dare come back. You are done, Brielle. I will bury you in court. I stopped in the doorway. I didn't turn around. I just opened the door and let the cold wind rush in. I walked out into the night. Behind me, the house was still lit up like a Christmas tree, but I knew the light was fake. Inside, the foundation had cracked. The murmurs were starting. The phones would be coming out. By tomorrow morning, the story of the Sutton family dinner would be circulating through the church, the country club, and the bank. They wanted a stage. They wanted an audience. I walked to Graham's car to wait for him, breathing in the sharp, clean air. They got exactly what they asked for. The morning after the dinner party, the silence from my parents was deafening. There were no angry texts, no voicemails, no flying monkeys sent to my door. It was the kind of silence that usually precedes a natural disaster, like the eerily calm water before a tsunami hits the shore. I went to work, but my mind was not on compliance audits. It was on the look on Mrs. Alden's face when she stood up in the dining room. It was on the way my father's face had purpled with rage, not shame. At 2 p.m, my computer pinged. It was a secure file transfer from Tessa Lang. The subject line was just one word: discrepancies. I clicked the link, a folder downloaded, heavy with PDF files. I opened the first one. It was a loan modification agreement for the property in Coeur d'Alene, dated August 12, 2023. I scrolled down. The document was dense, filled with legal jargon about debt service coverage ratios and balloon payments. It detailed a cash-out refinance of $150,000, money that was supposedly reinvested into the property for capital improvements. I scrolled to the bottom, to the signature page. There was Dennis's signature, bold and jagged. There was Marianne's signature, small and loopy. There was Graham's signature. And there, on the last line, was mine. Brielle Sutton. It was a perfect signature. The slant of the B was identical to how I write it. The trail of the E at the end was distinct. It looked exactly like my hand had held the pen. But there was a problem. On August 12, 2023, I was not in Colorado. I was not in Idaho. I was in a hospital bed in Denver, recovering from an emergency appendectomy. I remembered the date vividly because I had been terrified I would miss Evan's first day of 3rd grade. I had been hooked up to an IV, barely lucid from the pain medication. I certainly had not signed a complex commercial loan document. My hands started to tremble. I reached for my phone and dialed Tessa. "You saw it," she said the moment she picked up. Her voice was no longer just sharp. It was grim. "I was in the hospital that day," I said, my voice shaking. "Tessa, I physically could not have signed that." "I know," Tessa said. "I checked your social media and your medical leave records from that period before I sent it to you. That is why I flagged it." "How?" I asked. "It looks exactly like my signature." "Open the second file," she commanded. "The one labeled Insurance Addendum 2021. I opened it. It was a boring document authorizing a change in the liability insurance carrier for the LLC. "Look at the signature," Tessa said. I looked. It was identical. "Now," Tessa said, "I want you to look at the third file, a waiver of voting rights for a rental property in Aurora, dated last year." I opened it. The signature was there again. "Brielle," Tessa said, her voice dropping into a register I had never heard a lawyer use before. It was the tone of a detective finding the murder weapon. "It is not just that they look alike. I ran them through an image overlay program. They are pixel-perfect matches. No human being signs their name exactly the same way 3 times over the course of 3 years. The pressure points, the spacing, the start and stop lines, they are mathematically identical." A memory flashed through my mind, bright and searing. It was not the tax document this time. It was a different day, maybe 4 years ago. I was at my apartment. Dennis had called me, sounding harried and stressed. "Brielle, I am switching the insurance for the vacation home to get a better rate," he had said. "The agent is here right now, and I need to fax this within the hour to lock in the premium. I have that scan of your signature from the tax filing on my drive. Can I just drop it onto this insurance form? It is just administrative." I had been cooking dinner. Evan was crying about his homework. I was distracted. "Fine," I had said, "just for the insurance." "Thanks, kiddo," he had said. "You are a lifesaver." "He kept the file," I whispered. "He kept the high-resolution scan I gave him for the taxes. And he used it for the insurance. And then, he just never stopped using it." "He turned your signature into a stamp," Tessa said. "He has been pasting your consent onto documents for years. Refinances, waivers, debt restructuring. He has been running this company as a dictatorship while making it look like a democracy on paper." I felt sick. It was a physical nausea. This wasn't just my father being a jerk. This wasn't just him being controlling. "Is Graham in on it?" I asked, the fear choking me. I don't know, Tessa said. Call him, now. I patched Graham into the call. He answered on the first ring. I am looking at the files Tessa sent, Graham said immediately. His voice sounded hollow, like he was speaking from inside a deep well. Brielle, I didn't sign these. Which ones? I asked. There is a consent to encumber form from 2022, Graham said, his voice cracking. It authorized Dad to take out a $200,000 line of credit against the equity in the cabin to purchase investment vehicles. Brielle, I was in the middle of my divorce that month. I wasn't signing anything financial. My lawyer had frozen all my activity. If I had signed this, I would have been in contempt of court. He forged it, I said. Or rather, he copy-pasted it. I trusted him, Graham whispered. I let him handle the admin because he said he was protecting the legacy. I thought he was just being an overbearing dad. I didn't think he was... He couldn't finish the sentence. A criminal, Tessa finished for him. The word hung in the silence of the conference call. This changes the venue, Tessa said, her voice shifting back to professional steel. This is no longer a dispute about operating agreements. This is fraud. This is bank fraud. If these documents were submitted to federally insured lenders, which they were, then your father has committed multiple felonies. Oh my God, Graham breathed. We need to verify the metadata, Tessa continued. I am going to request the native digital files from the bank. If the PDF properties show that the signatures were added as image layers rather than signed via a certified e-signature platform like DocuSign, or wet signed and scanned, we have him. He left a digital fingerprint on every crime. My phone beeped. I pulled it away from my ear to look. It was a text message. Not from Marianne, not from Dennis. It was from my Aunt Sarah, my mother's younger sister. She was a sweet woman who usually stayed out of conflict, which made her the perfect pawn. Brielle, honey, the text read, your mom is worried sick. She can't stop crying. She knows things got heated. She wants you to know that they are setting up a new trust fund specifically for Evan, $50,000 to start, fully in your control. She just wants the family to heal and for this legal nastiness to stop. Please call her. I stared at the number, $50,000. That was the price of my silence. That was the price of my dignity. They thought they could buy me. They thought that because I was a single mother, because I rented my apartment, because I drove a leased car, that I would look at $50,000 and forget that they had starved my son. They thought money was the universal solvent for morality. What is it? Graham asked, hearing my silence. Aunt Sarah, I said. Mom is offering $50,000 for Evan if I drop the audit. Jesus, Graham said. They are trying to pay hush money. She called it a trust fund, I said. She called the audit legal nastiness. I typed a reply to Aunt Sarah. My fingers were hitting the screen hard enough to make a tapping sound. Tell Marianne that Evan is not for sale, and tell her that the price of healing isn't money. It's the truth. We are not stopping. I hit send. I declined. I told them. Good, Tessa said, because if you had accepted, it could be construed as extortion or complicity once the fraud charges land. Charges? Graham asked. Are we sending him to jail? That depends on him, Tessa said. But you need to understand where we are standing right now. This is the edge of the cliff. Once I send the demand letter regarding the forged signatures, the bank will have to be notified. The insurance company will have to be notified. The dominoes will fall, and they will fall heavy. She paused. Brielle, Graham, I need you to answer me clearly. Do you want me to pull the trigger on the signature verification? Because once I do, there is no family meeting that can fix it. This becomes a matter of public record. I closed my eyes. I saw the document with my name on it, a name I had worked hard to build, a reputation for integrity that I had cultivated in my career. My father had stolen that name. He had used it to lie to banks. He had made me an unwitting accomplice in his shell game. And he had done it all while telling me I wasn't good enough. He had used my credit worthiness while treating me like a second-class citizen. I opened my eyes. He stole my identity. Tessa, I said. He didn't act like a father. He acted like an identity thief. I agree, Graham said softly. Do it. Okay, Tessa said. I could hear the click of her keyboard. I am filing the motion for forensic document examination, and I am sending a preservation letter to the bank. She stopped typing and her voice softened. Just a fraction. I want you both to brace yourselves. Until today, this was a drama about a dysfunctional family. You were fighting over feelings and apologies. She took a breath. But if these signatures are fake, this isn't a family drama anymore. This is the thing people like your parents fear more than anything else in the world. It is not a scandal. It is a file with evidence, statutes, and sentencing guidelines. You are not fighting your father anymore. You are fighting a defendant. I looked out the window of my office. The city looked the same as it had this morning. But everything had changed. The man who raised me was not just a bully. He was a fraud. And I was about to be the one to put the handcuffs on the legacy he loved so much. Let the file speak, I said. I am done talking. The pen felt heavy in my hand, not because of the weight of the metal, but because of the gravity of what I was about to do. I sat in Tessa's conference room, the city of Denver sprawling out beneath the window, gray and indifferent. On the mahogany table lay a single sheet of paper. It was not a lawsuit. It was not an accusation of fraud. Not yet. It was a notice of dissent and restriction. Are you ready? Tessa asked. She was standing by the window, her arms crossed, watching me with that same sharp, analytical gaze she had used since the beginning. Yes, I said. I signed my name. This time, it was my real signature. My hand moved with a deliberate, practiced rhythm. I did not rush. With that ink, I effectively put a padlock on Cedar Hollow Holdings. Done, I said, sliding the paper across the table. Tessa picked it up and nodded. This is a surgical strike. Brielle, you are not dissolving the company. You are not seizing assets that do not belong to you. You are simply enforcing the clause that requires unanimous consent for major transactions, until they provide the forensic accounting we asked for, and until they explain the forged signatures. Nothing moves. They cannot refinance the cabin. They cannot sell the rental properties. They cannot move a single cent out of the operating accounts without your written approval. I am not stealing from them, I said, more to myself than to her. I am just stopping them from stealing from me. You are securing the crime scene, Tessa corrected, and you are taking away their allowance. She sat down and began drafting the cover letter that would accompany the notice. I am also sending a cease and desist regarding communication, she said, typing rapidly. From this moment on, Dennis and Marianne are not allowed to contact you directly regarding any financial matters. If they want to talk about the LLC, they talk to me. If they want to talk about the estate, they talk to me. If they want to complain about how unfair life is, they can talk to a therapist. I felt a wave of relief so profound, it almost made me dizzy. For 36 years, I had been trained to answer their calls on the first ring. I had been conditioned to act as their emotional shock absorber. Now, I had just outsourced that job to a woman who charged $400 an hour and enjoyed conflict. Thank you, I whispered. Don't thank me yet, Tessa said without looking up. When you corner a wild animal, that is when they bite. Keep your door locked. I left her office and drove home. The silence in my car felt different today. It wasn't lonely. It was fortified. When I got home, I called Graham. I signed the freeze, I told him. I know, Graham said. His voice sounded stronger than it had yesterday. Dad already got the digital notification from the bank. The line of credit for the renovations, which we both know was just him shifting debt around, was suspended immediately. How is the fallout? I asked. Nuclear, Graham said. But I did something too. Brielle. I paused, leaning against my kitchen counter. What did you do? You know the quarterly distribution? Graham asked. The check they send us from the family trust every 3 months? The one they always dangle over our heads whenever we disagree with them? I knew it well. It was never a huge amount, but it was enough to be a leash. It was the good behavior bonus. I refused it, Graham said. I sent the check back voided. I told them that until the forensic audit is complete, I cannot knowingly accept funds that might be commingled with fraudulent loans. I told them I would not be an accessory to money laundering. I smiled. It was a fierce, proud smile. Graham, that is huge. It felt good, he admitted. Dad screamed at me. He told me I was ungrateful. He told me I was cutting my own throat. But for the first time, I didn't care. I realized that money was never a gift. Brielle, it was a bribe to keep us from asking questions. We are breaking the cycle, I said. Yeah, Graham said. We are. Just be careful, okay? Dad is in the car. He left the house about 20 minutes ago. He wouldn't tell me where he was going, but he took the tin of butter cookies Mom made. My stomach tightened. The cookies? The peace-offering cookies, Graham said. He is coming for you. I hung up and checked the lock on my front door. I checked the peephole. I went into the living room where Evan was building a complex Lego fortress on the coffee table. Hey, bud, I said, keeping my voice light. Why don't you go play in your room for a bit? Put on your headphones. Mom has to deal with a boring adult thing. Evan looked up, his eyes bright and trusting. Is it Grandma? He knew. Kids always know. It might be, I said honestly. But you do not have to worry. I am handling it. He nodded and gathered his Legos. Okay, you are the boss. I am the boss, I repeated. 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I walked to the door. I did not open it immediately. I looked through the peephole. Dennis was standing there. He was wearing his cashmere coat and a flat cap, looking like a kindly grandfather from a holiday greeting card. In his hands, he held a round tin painted with snowflakes. Behind him, hovering near the railing, was Marianne. She looked smaller than usual, wrapped in a fur coat, her face pale and drawn. They had brought the full arsenal, the guilt trip, the props, the elderly parents standing in the cold. I took a deep breath. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door, but I stood explicitly in the threshold. I did not step back. I did not invite them in. Hello? I said. Dennis smiled. It was a tight, strained grimace that didn't reach his eyes. Brielle, he said, holding up the tin. We brought cookies. Your mother made them this morning. Evan's favorites. Evan isn't eating them, I said. Dennis's smile twitched. He lowered the tin slightly. Now, Brielle, let's not be dramatic. We just want to see our grandson. We want to come in, sit down, and talk this out like a family. No lawyers, no letters, just us. There is nothing to talk about, I said. Tessa sent you the instructions. Any discussion about the property or the LLC goes through her. I am not here about the damn LLC, Dennis snapped, his facade slipping for a second before he caught it. He took a breath. I am here as a father. We want to see Evan. We miss him. You saw him 4 days ago, I said. You saw him when you watched him cry at the dinner table and did nothing. Marianne stepped forward. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Brielle, please, I have not slept. I am sick over this. How can you keep him from us? He is our blood. He is your blood when it suits you, I said. He is your blood when you want a photo for Facebook. But when there is one slice of cake left, then he is just a guest. Oh, for heaven's sake, Marianne cried out, her voice turning shrill. It was cake. Why are you so obsessed with the cake? The boy needs to learn resilience. He needs to learn that he cannot always be first. You are making him soft. Brielle, you are raising him to be weak because you coddle him. There it was. The mask fell completely. She wasn't sorry. She didn't think she had done anything wrong. In her mind, Evan's tears were a sign of weakness, and my defense of him was a failure of parenting. She believed that humiliation was a valid teaching tool. I looked at her, and I felt nothing but a cold, hard clarity. You think demanding respect is a weakness, I said. You think that because you let Dad bully you for 40 years, everyone else should just take it, but I am not you, Mother. I looked at Dennis. And Evan is not Graham or Holly. He does not have to earn his place at the table. He was born with it. You are keeping him from us out of spite, Dennis growled. Stepping closer, he used his height to try and intimidate me, a tactic that had worked when I was 16. You are using that boy as a pawn in a financial dispute. No, I said, holding my ground. I am protecting him. You do not get to see him. You do not get to come into my home. Not until you look him in the eye and apologize. And I mean a real apology. Not, I am sorry you felt bad. I want you to say, I was wrong to treat you like you didn't matter. Dennis scoffed. I will not apologize to a 9-year-old child. That is absurd. Children respect their elders, not the other way around. Then you will not see him, I said. I have rights, Dennis shouted. Grandparents' rights. Actually, in Colorado, you don't, I said calmly. Not unless you can prove I am unfit. And considering I have a spotless record and you are currently under investigation for bank fraud and forgery, I do not think you want to invite a judge to look into our lives. Dennis froze. The color drained from his face. He stared at me, and he realized for the first time that I knew. He realized that the compliance manager daughter he had dismissed had figured out the puzzle. He lowered the cookie tin. His hands were shaking. You are making a mistake, he said. His voice was low, venomous. You think you are smart, Brielle. You think this lawyer can protect you, but you live in this town. You work in this town. He took a step back, his eyes narrowing into slits. I know everyone, he hissed. I know your boss at Ridgeway. I know the board members. I have spent 40 years building a reputation in this city. If you want to play dirty, if you want to lock my assets and call me a criminal. He leaned in, his breath clouding in the cold air. I will tell my story. I will tell everyone that my daughter is a mentally unstable woman who is trying to extort her elderly parents. I will make you radioactive. You will not just lose your family. Brielle, you will lose your standing. Marianne was sobbing quietly now, clutching his arm, playing the victim perfectly. Go ahead, I said. Tell your story. But remember, Dad, I have the receipts. And unlike your stories, mine are signed, dated, and notarized. I reached for the door handle. Get off my porch, I said, and take your cookies with you. I slammed the door. I threw the deadbolt. I stood there in the hallway, my heart pounding against my ribs like a hammer. I listened to their footsteps retreating down the concrete path. I heard the car door slam. I heard the engine rev and fade away. I did not cry. I walked into the living room. Evan was sitting on the floor, his headphones around his neck. He looked up at me, his eyes searching my face. Are they gone? He asked. Yes, I said. They are gone. Are they mad? He asked. Yes, I said. I sat down on the floor next to him and picked up a blue Lego brick. But that is okay. Sometimes people get mad when you stop letting them be mean. Evan thought about this for a second. He snapped the blue brick onto his fortress. Okay, he said. Do you want to help me build the tower? I would love to, I said. We built the tower. It was tall and strong. But outside, the war was shifting fronts. I knew my father. I knew he wasn't going home to reflect. He was going home to make calls. He was going to try to burn my life down before the truth could come out. He threatened to tell his story. I looked at my son, safe and calm in our small, quiet apartment. Let him tell it. I thought, I am writing the ending. The fallout from my father's threat was immediate and efficient. Dennis Sutton did not need social media to destroy a reputation. He used the old-fashioned network of phone calls, prayer circles, and golf course whispers. By Tuesday, I walked into the grocery store and saw Mrs. Gable, a woman who had taught my Sunday school class 20 years ago, turn her cart down a different aisle to avoid me. By Wednesday, a colleague at Ridgeway Compliance asked me, visibly uncomfortable, if everything was stable at home because he had heard rumors about a mental health crisis. My father was painting a masterpiece of fiction. In his version of the story, I was a grieving, unstable single mother who had snapped under the pressure of debt and was now trying to blackmail her generous parents who were only trying to protect the family estate. He told people I was demanding a cash payout. He told people I was weaponizing my son. It was infuriating. It made me want to scream the truth from the rooftops. But Tessa Lang forbade it. "Do not engage," she ordered. "If you post a defense, you look guilty. If you call him a liar publicly without the final evidence, he sues you for defamation. We let him talk. We let him dig his hole. We keep our eyes on the money." And so, while Dennis was busy assassinating my character at the country club, Tessa was dissecting his ledger. On Thursday afternoon, I was back in her office. The mood was different today. There was no triumph, only a heavy, dirty feeling in the air. "We found a pattern," Tessa said. She projected a spreadsheet onto the wall monitor. "Look at this line item, every December for the last 5 years. Cedar Hollow Holdings makes a significant donation to a nonprofit called the Littleton Civic Heritage Fund." "That sounds like something Dad would support," I said. "He loves looking like a philanthropist." "It does," Tessa agreed. "Except I looked up the 990 tax forms for this heritage fund. It is a registered nonprofit, but its operating costs are 80% of its revenue. And guess who their primary consultant is for community outreach?" She clicked a button. A new document appeared. "A consulting firm owned by a man named Robert Vance." My stomach turned. "Bob Vance? He is on the zoning board. He plays golf with Dad every Saturday." "Exactly," Tessa said. "Your father moves $20,000 from the LLC to the charity. The charity pays $15,000 to Vance's consulting firm for services, and then, 3 weeks later, Cedar Hollow Holdings gets a variance approval for a rental property or a permit that was previously stuck in limbo." I stared at the screen. "It is a bribe." "It is a kickback loop disguised as charity," Tessa corrected. "He is using the LLC, an entity you are a member of, to launder bribes to a city official, and because he writes it off as a charitable donation, he gets a tax deduction for committing a crime." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the office air conditioning. This was so much worse than I thought. I had expected him to be hiding personal expenses, maybe buying a boat on the company dime. I didn't expect systemic corruption. "There is more," Tessa said. "Look at the checks for the fundraising events the charity holds. The venue costs, the catering, they are paid out of the LLC's operating account." She zoomed in on a check image. "Look at the signature." It wasn't Dennis's signature, and for once, it wasn't my forged signature. It was Holly's. "Holly is the event planner for the family," I whispered. "She loves organizing the parties." "She signed the checks that funneled money into this sham charity," Tessa said. "Which means, legally speaking, your sister is the signatory on an embezzlement scheme." My phone buzzed. It was Graham. "Check your email. Now. I found the smoking gun." I opened my email on my phone. Graham had forwarded me an archived message from 4 years ago. It was an email Dennis had sent to Bob Vance, but he had accidentally CC'd Graham because he was asking Graham to print a document attached to it. The subject line was, "Donation and the Aurora Permit." The body of the email read, "Bob, the $20,000 is on its way to the Heritage Fund. I expect the zoning issue on the Aurora duplex to be resolved by Monday. Let's keep this clean. Dennis." It was explicit. Let's keep this clean. He had written his crime down in black and white. "Graham found it," I said, showing the phone to Tessa. "Quid pro quo." "That is it," Tessa said, leaning back. "That is the nail in the coffin. But Brielle, before we drop this, you need to understand what happens to Holly. Her name is on the checks. If the IRS or the district attorney looks at this, she goes down with him." I thought about Holly. I thought about her smirk at the dinner table. I thought about how she called me sensitive while my son wiped his tears. But then, the door to Tessa's office opened. The receptionist looked flustered. "Ms. Lang, I am sorry. There is a woman here who says she is Ms. Sutton's sister. She is hysterical." I turned around. Holly was standing in the doorway. She was not wearing her usual perfect makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She was wearing a tracksuit, which I had never seen her do in public. She looked like she hadn't slept in 3 days. She saw me and burst into tears. But these weren't the fake, manipulative tears my mother used. These were tears of pure, unadulterated terror. "He made me sign them," Holly sobbed, walking into the room without being invited. She collapsed into the chair next to me. "Brielle, you have to believe me. I didn't know." "Didn't know what?" Tessa asked, her voice cool. "The charity," Holly gasped. "Dad called me this morning. He was screaming. He said you guys were digging into the books, and that I needed to keep my mouth shut about the heritage parties. He said if anyone asked, I was the organizer and he just approved the budget." She looked at me, her hands shaking so hard her bracelets rattled. "He told me that if the police got involved, it was my signature on the checks, so I would take the fall. He said he would take care of me when I got out, but that I had to be the shield." I stared at her, the golden child, the one who did everything right, the one who got the extra dessert. "He told you to go to prison for him?" I asked. "He said it wouldn't come to that," Holly cried. "He said I just needed to say it was my project, but I Googled it. Brielle, I Googled the charity. It is fake, and I signed the checks. But..." She grabbed my hand. Her grip was clammy. "He is going to sacrifice me," she whispered. "He is going to throw me under the bus to save himself and his reputation. I am his daughter, and he is setting me up." I looked at my sister. For years, I had resented her. I had envied her status in the family. But now, looking at the wreckage of her face, I realized the truth. I was the scapegoat, yes, but she was the collateral. Being the favorite didn't mean she was loved. It meant she was useful. And when a tool is no longer useful, or when it becomes a liability, you discard it. "I have the email," I told her quietly. Graham found an email where he explicitly links the donation to a bribe. It proves he directed the funds. Holly let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. "He did?" "Yes," I said. "But if you want to save yourself, Holly, you have to stop protecting him. You have to turn on him." Holly wiped her nose with her sleeve. She looked at Tessa, then at me. The entitlement was gone. What remained was a woman realizing that her entire life had been a performance for an audience that didn't care if she lived or died. "I have the event binders," Holly said, her voice trembling. "I kept everything, the invoices he told me to fake, the guest lists that were padded. I have them in my trunk." "Bring them in," Tessa said. As Holly ran out to the parking lot, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Marianne. She must have known the walls were crumbling. She must have sensed that Holly had defected. "Brielle," the text read, "I think things have gone too far. Your father is very stressed. We are willing to offer a private apology to you and Evan. We can sit down, just us, and Dad will say he is sorry for being harsh. But this legal witch hunt has to stop. It is destroying the family name. Please, be reasonable." I read the text 3 times. A private apology, just us. They wanted to whisper sorry in a closed room so they could keep screaming their lies in public. They wanted to buy my silence with a few mumbled words so they could keep their standing in the community. They wanted me to save their reputation at the expense of my own truth. I thought about the smear campaign. I thought about the fraud. I thought about Holly, terrified and shaking in a tracksuit. I thought about Evan asking if he was family. I typed my reply. "A private apology does not fix public damage. You called me a liar to the whole town. You committed crimes that involved your children. There is no deal. Mom, there is no being reasonable with people who eat their own young." I sent it. Then I turned to Tessa. "We have the signatures," I said. "We have the bribe email from Graham. We have the fake invoices from Holly, and we have the bank records." "We have everything," Tessa said. She looked at the stack of evidence. It was a mountain. "What do you want to do?" she asked. "We can file a civil suit. We can force a settlement that gives you your share and walks away." I looked at the files. If I settled, they would pay me. They would pay me a lot of money to go away. And then they would find a new way to spin it. They would tell people I settled because I was greedy. They would keep the LLC. They would keep doing this. And eventually, they would do it to Evan. No, I said. I stood up. I do not want a settlement, I said. I want a dissolution. I want to report the fraud to the bank. I want to report the forgery to the state. And I want to send the file to the IRS. Tessa raised an eyebrow. That is the nuclear option. Brielle, that ends them. They lose the house. They lose the standing. Dennis likely goes to federal prison. He told me he would tell his story, I said. He told me he would destroy me to protect his legacy. I picked up the file containing the Only Family Gets to Eat incident report I had written for my own records. He forgot one thing, I said. If you burn down the house to kill the spider, you have to be standing outside when you light the match, and he is still inside. Prepare the filings, I told Tessa. I am not looking for leverage anymore. I am looking for justice. Holly walked back in, carrying a heavy box of binders. She looked at me, fear still in her eyes, but also something else, respect. Are we doing this? She asked. Yes, I said. We are proving who the family actually is. I looked at the evidence. The trap was set. The players were in position. The next time I saw my father, it wouldn't be at a dinner table. It would be across a deposition table, and this time, he wouldn't be the one deciding who got to eat. The conference room at Harrison & Associates was designed to intimidate. It had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Denver skyline, a table made of polished mahogany that was long enough to land a plane on, and air conditioning that was set just a few degrees too cold. Tessa sat at the head of the table. I sat to her right. Graham and Holly sat next to me. We were a united front, a wall of silence waiting for the storm. At 10 o'clock sharp, the double doors opened. Dennis walked in first. He was wearing his best suit, a navy blue pinstripe that cost more than my first car. He walked with his chest out, chin up, radiating the specific kind of confidence that comes from 40 years of never being told no. Marianne trailed behind him, dabbing at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief, playing the role of the grieving matriarch to perfection. Their lawyer, Preston Harrison, looked significantly less confident. He looked like a man who had read the file we sent over and knew he was walking into a minefield. Dennis didn't even look at the lawyers. He looked straight at me. Well, he said, throwing his leather portfolio onto the table with a heavy thud. We are all here. Let's get this over with so I can get back to work. I assume you are ready to sign the waiver. Brielle? Or do we need to waste another hour explaining simple business structure to you? He sat down, leaning back in the chair, claiming the space. He thought this was a negotiation. He thought he was here to scold a rebellious child and offer a small allowance in exchange for compliance. Tessa didn't blink. She didn't even introduce herself. She simply slid a single, thick document across the smooth wood of the table. We are not here to sign waivers, Mr. Sutton, Tessa said. Her voice was calm, dangerous. We are here to discuss the forensic report regarding the digital signatures found on the loan documents for Cedar Hollow Holdings. Dennis waved a hand dismissively. Administrative efficiency. I have power of attorney in implied situations. It is standard practice. It is a felony, Tessa corrected. She opened the file in front of her. We had an independent expert analyze the metadata of the loan modification agreement dated August 12th. The signature on that document is a pixel-perfect match to a signature file created 3 years prior. Furthermore, the IP address that uploaded the document to the bank's portal traces back to your home office in Littleton, at a time when Brielle Sutton was hospitalized and under heavy sedation. Preston Harrison, Dennis's lawyer, shifted in his seat. He picked up the document Tessa had slid over. He read the first page, and I saw the color drain from his face. He whispered something to Dennis. Dennis ignored him. So I used a stamp, Dennis scoffed. Brielle agreed to help the family. I just expedited the process. You are trying to hang me on a technicality? A technicality? I spoke up. My voice was steady. I looked at the man who had raised me, and I felt nothing. No fear, no desire to please, just a cold, hard observation of a stranger. You took out $150,000 in my name. You leveraged my credit score, my liability, without my consent. That is not a technicality. Dad, that is theft." "It was for the business," Dennis shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "The business that you will inherit. It is all for you." "Is it?" Graham asked. Graham stood up. He didn't look like the peacekeeper anymore. He looked tired, but strong. He pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. The email printout. "Because I found this," Graham said. He slid the email toward his father. "It is the email you sent to Bob Vance, the one where you explicitly state that the $20,000 donation from the company account was a payment for the zoning permit in Aurora." Dennis froze. He stared at the piece of paper. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "And," Graham continued, his voice shaking slightly, "Holly brought in the binders. We have the invoices. Dad, we know you were funneling money through the charity to pay for kickbacks, and you used Holly's signature to do it." Dennis whipped his head around to look at Holly. She was sitting next to me, refusing to meet his eyes, her arms crossed tight over her chest. "You gave them the books?" Dennis hissed at her. "You traitor! I told you to get rid of them." "I am not going to jail for you," Holly whispered. "I am done." The silence that followed was absolute. The air in the room felt heavy, suffocating. Dennis Sutton, the man who controlled everything, the man who moved people like chess pieces, had run out of moves. His lawyer, Preston, closed his folder and placed his hand over the email. "Dennis," Preston said quietly, "we need to stop talking, right now." But Dennis couldn't stop. His ego wouldn't let him. He looked around the table, seeing his empire crumbling, seeing his children united against him. He needed a weapon. He needed leverage. He turned to Marianne. "Look at your mother!" Dennis bellowed, pointing at her. Marianne immediately let out a sob, burying her face in her hands. "Look what you are doing to her. She is sick with grief. She has done nothing but love you. And you are dragging her through this mud. How can you be so cruel? Only family stands by you, and you are destroying it." It was the oldest trick in his book. Weaponize the guilt. Use the mother's tears to shame the children into submission. I looked at Marianne. I saw a woman who had chosen comfort over courage every single day of her life. "Mom," I said. She looked up, her eyes wet, hopeful. She thought I was cracking. "You taught me something very important on Christmas," I said. "You told Evan that only family gets to eat. You taught me that in your mind. Family is a club. It is a VIP section where you get perks if you follow the rules." I leaned forward. "But you were wrong. Family isn't a privilege you grant to people who obey you. Family is a responsibility. It is the duty to protect each other, and you failed. You didn't protect Evan from your cruelty. You didn't protect me from Dad's fraud. You didn't protect Holly from becoming an accomplice." I just wanted peace," Marianne stammered. "No," I said. "You wanted silence. There is a difference." Dennis stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. His face was purple. "Fine!" he screamed. "You want to play hardball? You are out. You hear me? Brielle, you are out of the will. I will rewrite it this afternoon. You won't get a dime. I will leave everything to the church. I will leave it to the state. You will die with nothing from me." He expected me to flinch. He expected me to panic about the money, about the legacy. I smiled. It was a genuine, calm smile. "You cannot take back what was never yours, Dennis," I said. I nodded to Tessa. Tessa opened the final folder. "Mr. Sutton," Tessa said professionally, "as of 9 o'clock this morning, Brielle has filed a declaration of trust. She has placed her entire membership interest in Cedar Hollow Holdings into an irrevocable trust for the benefit of her son, Evan. She has also filed a lis pendens on the Idaho property and the Aurora rentals based on the fraud investigation." Dennis stared at her, uncomprehending. "What does that mean?" he demanded. "It means," Tessa said, "that the assets are frozen, permanently. You cannot sell them. You cannot borrow against them. You cannot rewrite the will to exclude her share because legally, it no longer belongs to her. It belongs to a protected trust for a minor. And because the fraud investigation is active, if you try to liquidate anything, the court will seize it immediately as proceeds of a crime. I looked at my father. I don't want your money, Dad. I never did. I just wanted to make sure you couldn't use it to hurt us anymore. You are locked out. You are the manager of a company you cannot operate. Dennis sank back into his chair. He looked small. For the first time in his life, he looked like an old man. The power was gone. The leverage was gone. The fear he used to rule us had evaporated. You ruined everything, he whispered. No, I said. I just turned on the lights. I stood up. Graham and Holly stood up with me. We are leaving now, I said. Tessa will handle the rest. She will be in touch with the district attorney regarding the signatures. I turned to walk away, but then I stopped. I looked at my mother one last time. She was sitting there, pale and trembling, looking at the door as if looking for an exit. Mom, I said. She looked at me. If you ever want to see Evan again, I said. If you ever want to be a grandmother to him, you know the condition. You come to my house, alone, and you apologize to him. You look him in the eye and you admit you were wrong. No excuses. No, I am sorry you were sensitive. Just the truth. Marianne opened her mouth. I could see the struggle in her eyes. She wanted to see him. I knew she did. But to apologize, to truly apologize, would mean admitting that Dennis was wrong. It would mean defying him. It would mean losing her position as the perfect, infallible matriarch. Brielle, she started, then stopped. She looked at Dennis, who was staring at the table. She looked back at me. I can't just... She choked on the words. She physically could not do it. Her pride was stronger than her love. I know, I said softly. I didn't think you could. I turned my back on them. Let's go, I said to my brother and sister. We walked out of the conference room. We walked through the glass doors of the law firm. We took the elevator down to the lobby. When we stepped out onto the street, the sun was shining. The air smelled of exhaust and coffee and winter, and it was the sweetest thing I had ever smelled. Graham put his arm around my shoulders. You did it. We did it, I said. What are you going to do now? Holly asked. She looked lost, but for the first time, she looked free. I am going home, I said. I have a date. I got home at 3:00. Evan was waiting for me. He ran to the door when I opened it, burying his face in my coat. Did you win? He asked. I knelt down so I was eye level with him. Yeah, buddy, I said. I won. Did you make them sad? He asked. I made them stop, I said. And sometimes, making people stop being mean makes them sad. But that is not our fault. He nodded, accepting this logic. I am hungry, he announced. I laughed. Me too. I went to the kitchen. I didn't have a champagne-colored tree. I didn't have crystal pedestals. I took out a box of instant chocolate pudding and a bag of gummy worms. Sous chef, I called out. Front and center. Evan ran in, dragging a chair to the counter. We made dirt cups. We crushed Oreos with a rolling pin, making a huge mess on the counter that would have given my mother a stroke. We stirred the pudding until it was smooth. We buried the gummy worms deep in the chocolate dirt. We sat on the floor of the living room to eat them. It wasn't a peppermint cheesecake. It wasn't served on fine china. It was messy and simple and cheap. I took a bite. It tasted like freedom. I looked at my son. He had chocolate on his chin. He was laughing at the TV show we were watching. He looked safe. He looked whole. My mother had said that only family gets to eat. She meant it as a threat. She meant it as a way to starve us of affection unless we complied. But she was wrong about the definition. Family isn't the people who share your blood. Family isn't the people who share a last name or a trust fund. Family are the people who make sure you never go hungry. Family are the people who build a fortress with you when the world feels scary. Family are the people who respect you enough to tell you the truth. I wiped the chocolate off Evan's chin. You know what? I said. What? He asked, mouthful of gummy worm. You belong here, I said. You belong where you are respected, and this is where we belong. He smiled, a true easy smile. I know, Mom, he said. Pass the worms. I handed him the bag. We ate until we were full, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for permission to take the last bite. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and let's share our thoughts. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so this story can reach even more people who need to hear it.